Hi, I'm Ashley with Campbell. Thanks for investing your time to help your community be a great place to live. Before you watch the video, make sure to click the subscribe button so that we can help you make educated decisions as a board member.
Welcome, everyone. It is now 12 o'clock, so we are going to go ahead and begin. My name is Hakari at Campbell Property Management, and this is the Tree Trimming CEU course presented by Sean Kay from Complete Property Maintenance. For those of you who are not familiar with Campbell, we have been in business since 1953 and manage over 450 HOA and condo associations from Miami-Dade to Central Florida, including Orlando, Daytona, and the surrounding areas. Additionally, we are Florida's highest rated management company. We work to bring valuable education to board members and property managers through our webinars, blog, and monthly newsletter. You can access our blog at getfan.org and see our upcoming webinars at campbellevents.org. And with that, I will stop sharing and hand it over to Sean Kay from Complete Property Maintenance to get us started.
So, hi everyone. Thank you for joining. And Hikari, can you see my screen? Everything good at this point?
Yep, perfect.
Perfect. All right. Thanks so much, guys. All right. So, who is CPM and what do we do? First of all, we've been in business for 49 years. So, I created this PowerPoint last year. We're now celebrating our 49th year. We serve Broward, Palm Beach, Martin, St. Lucie counties. We have four main branches and many smaller branches. Our headquarters are located in Coconut Creek. We have a larger branch in Lantana, Jupiter, and Port St. Lucie. What we do, so we do tree trimming, irrigation, FERT, pest control, landscape design, landscape lighting, holiday lighting, and all kinds of landscape maintenance. We are ISA certified. Our services include tree trimming, tree removal, root pruning, root barrier, stump grinding, holiday lighting, tree assessments, hurricane storm cleanup, royal palm ties, just to name a few. By the way, these are all pictures of work we've done, jobs we've done. Far left, you can see holiday lighting. That was several years ago on a smaller property. The bottom left, you'll see we do trunk staining on decorative, like Sylvester palms. We use non-toxic water-based stains and sealers. On the right side and bottom right, you'll see I'm sorry, that's landscape lighting. This here is a property in Miser Country Club we did several years back. And in the middle, that's us installing a root barrier at Winston Trails in Boynton. All right, so what does this course cover? It covers reasons for trimming or pruning, types of pruning and pruning terms, how to prune or trim, what not to do, examples of them, misconceptions and other useful information. And at the end, I have questions and answers. It's basically just a question that's going to pop up on the screen and it's for you to answer. I'll give it like, 15 seconds, 10 seconds, let you figure out the answer, and I'll just give you the answer after that. I would like to finish a little early today, so that if you have any questions, you can ask them in the questions and answers, or Hakari can also will send my contact information, so you can email me questions if it doesn't get answered or if we don't have time. Okay, so reasons for pruning. Reasons to prune trees may include, but are not limited to. So health, structure, pruning. The main goal with any kind of pruning, especially with younger trees, you should start with younger trees, is creating a central leader. A central leader on a tree it's what creates, and this is with hardwood trees, creates a nice strong trunk and prevents limbs from breaking, trees from splitting, and just the overall health of a tree is by creating a nice central leader. And I'll obviously show you examples of that. Safety, potentially dangerous limbs may break due to deadwood diseases, bad structure, fallen coconuts and palms, large seed pods like royal palms, large palm fronds falling from very high, obstructing visibility of pedestrians or drivers on roadways, clearance for walkways, vehicle clearance, low branches interfering with traffic, Vista pruning, trying to see a view from either a higher or lower, you know, uh, uh, second balcony, second story balcony. If you have a tree that's too high, obstructing your view to a lake or a golf course, sometimes we get asked to reduce the tree. Or if it's in between, we'll do a selective reduction, reduce the size of the trees to create a vista view, or even from the bottom. You can lift up the lower hanging branches to an extent. Preventing prevent growing branches or palm fronds from damaging roofs, gutters, homes, screen enclosures. Of course, if branches or palm fronds touch, they can, rip screens, damage gutters and whatnot. But then also it's a pathway for rodents or insects. Allowing light to penetrate. If you have sod that's dying, you might not be getting enough sunlight. With trees or palms dropping leaves, seeds, fruit, making a mess on driveways and walkways. If they're touching street lights or obstructing signs. Wind clearance, wind resistance. That's another huge reason you trim trees, thinning out trees. This prevents, trees from toppling over in high winds or limbs from breaking. And of course, aesthetics. That's also at the top. All right, so shade trees should be trimmed once a year, and palm trees should be trimmed once or twice a year, depending on the tree. You might know that there are two types of, well, we classify palm trees in two different classes when it comes to trimming. There's self-cleaning trees, such as royal palms, adenidias, foxtail palms are self-cleaning, meaning the palm's fronds, when they are so trees, palm trees use their fronds to feed off their fronds for nutrients, and of course to gather sunlight. When they have exhausted all the energy reserves, the fronds turn brown and they peel off by themselves and they fall off. Some trees like sable palms are a little different. They have to be trimmed. Otherwise, they just hang on a tree and look very ugly. Uh, Okay, so now we're going to talk about types of pruning and pruning terms, just so you're familiar with that if you're dealing with a landscape company or a tree company. The term trim and prune is used interchangeably. So they kind of go, people use it interchangeably, especially when it comes to trees. Subordinating is the main type of trimming with trees. You're cutting back select limbs to a next lateral limb. And this is the main difference between properly trimming trees and not doing it properly. Leaving a stub is the incorrect way of trimming a tree, and I'll show you examples. You're reducing, so you can reduce the height of a tree, the canopy, crown reduction is an example. Raising or lifting, lower hanging branches, lifting the tree to make it look a little nicer, clearance, vista view. Cleaning, you'll hear the term cleaning. Again, that just refers to, let's say, for if you know what an areca palm is, it's a multi-stalked cluster of palms. Cleaning out would be maybe taking out the smaller stalks, the larger ones, and cleaning out any dead fronds. Make it look a little cleaner on a hardwood tree. It usually means removing broken branches, dead wood, diseased branches, and water sprouts or suckers. Thinning is, like I said, one of the main reasons you trim trees. It's to thin out the canopy and create a little more wind or less wind resistance. There's two types of cuts. Removal cut, which is when you're talking about removal cuts, you are basically, if you were to do let's say a crown reduction, you're taking a larger limb down to a smaller branch. Um, you try to avoid reduction cuts if possible, but there's many situations where it's absolutely necessary. So if you were doing a crown reduction, you're going to take larger, branches or even sometimes the main central leader and take it down to a lateral, smaller branch. That would be called a reduction cut. Oh, I'm sorry, we're talking about removal cut. So removal cut here is your standard cut. You're trimming a smaller branch back to a larger limb, and I'll show you examples of that. Reduction cut is what I just talked about before. A crown reduction is, again, we're talking about hardwood trees here, is to reduce the entire crown of the tree. You can do selective reductions, which is basically, maybe if you just want to reduce the height, or a side of the tree that's maybe causing an issue. Okay. How to properly trim or prune. So this is one of the most, well, this is what this whole webinar is basically about is how to properly trim or prune trees. The three-step cut method is basically what every municipality requires with trimming, and it actually abides by, it's all part of the ANSI 300 pruning standards, and every municipality that I know of adopts those standards. So here's an example of a three-step cut, and I'm going to try to get my pen out here. So if you were to cut a large limb, say with a chainsaw, right at number 3, and that's right outside the branch collar, which is a proper way to trim trees, you want to cut right outside the branch collar. Reason for that is this branch collar right here has all the decay fighting organisms that prevent decay from working its way into the tree. So by cutting it flush, you would take that away, and now you increase the chance of the tree decaying or dying or getting a disease. Trimming too far out here, again, is like, if a limb breaks, you now have the possibility of decay working its way into the tree. So you're going to start with your first cut underneath here. So you would start at step number 1, which is basically a cut on the underside about 12 inches away from the branch collar. What that does is when you make your second cut, is it prevents when that branch comes down, it prevents the bark from peeling all the way down and, damaging the tree. So that cut is made. So you then make your second cut about a few inches away. When that branch comes down, it'll fall down. The bark will peel up to there and break off. And then this smaller section right here, you can make with a chainsaw and not worry about that. So this is basically the steps. Um, Certain trees are very susceptible to decay. Some trees are not very good compartmentalizers. And what that means is if they were to have a break or whatnot, the decay would start entering the tree and working its way down the branches and into the trunk of the tree. This is an example of a screw pine. It's very susceptible to the decay. So you can see here where somebody who was inexperienced made some bad cuts and the tree started decaying. At the very bottom, I circled some areas where the decay is working down the tree. All right, so here's an example of a reduction cut and reducing the height of the canopy. On the left side, you have a nice strong central leader, and on the very right, and you see these often for um, like electrical lines. You'll see asplun come out and basically take down the tree. It's done properly, but you're reducing the main central leader. I mentioned earlier, the best time to trim your trees is when they're young. Here's an example of a tree in a parking lot. So this is where you want trees to be healthy and in their best form. And here they have two central leaders. So a leader is, it goes up and it branches into two. That's a huge problem. So what you get on the inside is included bark and a very high potential for it to split in that area. On the right side, you have a good form, which is basically a nice strong central leader, and that's what you're trying to achieve, especially in parking lots or everywhere, to be honest. Again, this is a example of a reduction cut and a removal cut. So removal is your standard cut. That's pretty much the cut you do all the time. You're basically taking a smaller limb back to a larger limb. And a reduction cut, which you try to avoid if possible, is taking a larger limb down to a smaller limb. You don't have as much of the disease-fighting properties as you do with a removal cut, but you still have a much better chance than just leaving a stub. Here's just an example of, removing limbs off a tree. So one of the examples here I wanted to talk about is you'll see here, let me circle this. So very sharp V-shaped branches, attached branches. The reason those are bad is because they usually include like included bark, and what included bark is basically just what it sounds like. Bark is included in the union of the tree where it branches off, and that's a weak zone. High winds, those branches will break. So you try to keep a 60 to 45 degree angle on a branch. This is not perfect, but that's what you aim for. Um, Deadwood, suckers, lower hanging branches. These are suckers or water sprouts. So this right here is a example of a crown reduction. Um, it's an example of a proper crown reduction where the entire crown of the tree was reduced, and if you look carefully, you don't see any stubs. Stubs meaning a branch wasn't subordinated. So if a branch isn't subordinated, which is a branch taken back to a lateral branch, you'll get a stub. The reason that is not allowed by any municipality that I know of is because you get weak water sprouts. I'm sorry, weak water sprouts that grow out of those cut stub areas, in addition to it being a very uh, easy place for decay to work its way down. Okay, so talking about palms, you'll hear the term 9 and 3 o'clock position often when trimming trees, palm trees, and that's because on non-self-cleaning trees like sable palms or Sylvester palms or whatnot, you want to keep the fronds to a 9 and 3 o'clock position, like this. As I mentioned, palms use their fronds for feeding, and if you take too much off, it damages health of the tree. Okay, what not to do. This is an example here of flush cutting. It's basically cutting inside the branch collar, so you've taken the tree's protective properties away. And here's an example of properly trimming outside the branch collar. Here's an example of overlifting. Reasons why this is not good is because you make the tree very unbalanced. It also forces the tree to want to grow taller. And also the roots, the taller it grows, the roots extend out further, and then you'll see damaged curbs, streets, sidewalks when trees get too tall, when they're overlifted. Here's an example of a tree being hat racked. I apologize. This is an example of a tree being hat racked, and it's basically leaving stubs everywhere where all the it wasn't properly trimmed. And like a tree this in this condition, I would just remove. It's very dangerous at this point because the limbs that grow off these are going to be water sprouts, and they're very weakly attached, and it looks very ugly. And I'll show you examples of that too. Lines tailing. So this is when you remove all the inside foliage, which is a mistake, and a lot of tree companies do it. It's basically taking out all the foliage up to the very tips of the trees. And what happens is the tree compensates by not having a good taper to the branches. And they are also, there's a dampening properties of having leaves on the inside, and you lose that dampening property. So now you get like large limbs that sway a lot more in the wind. Here's an example of pencil necking, which is basically, or you can hear it as people call it rooster cuts. It's basically just cutting all the fronds up to like, a few palm fronds and the spear leaf. And what happens with this is, again, palms feed off their fronds, and what you get is a lack of nutrients, and you'll get these thinner areas on the trunk. Okay, so examples. Again, here's a proper cut, highlighted in yellow, right outside the branch collar. The red dotted line shows a flush cut. Here's a picture of codominant leaders on a young tree. Best time to trim your trees is when they're young. Get a nice strong central leader created. These are examples of included bark. You can see at the very bottom that darker stuff inside is actually included bark, and that's where it was the weakest part of the tree, and that's where it split. And this is another example on the top right of what included bark looks like. It doesn't always have a crack down the middle, but that's just showing you it's about the crack right there. But that's a weak union. Again, on the far left top, you'll see a reduction cut. You'll see these, like asplun and these FPL around electrical lines, take them down and create a reduction cut. On the right, you'll see topping a tree, which is somewhat of an example. It's where you just leave stubs and you just cut the tops, and it's basically hat racking. And just below that, you can see what weak limbs form after hat racking or topping a tree. These are just examples of, thinning out the bottom, creating a little thinning out also at the bottom. You can see the tree on the right's a little more thinned out to let sunlight through and also for wind to go through. Obvious examples of what it looks like if you don't trim non-self-cleaning trees like sabals. It's a perfect area for rodents to hide inside the trees, and you get rats, snakes, a lot of insects. Here's an example of basically vista pruning. In this picture on the right, in my opinion, it's overlifted. This could have been done without going so harsh, but that's just an example. This is a beautiful canary palm that's been trimmed. Again, when trimming trees and palms, you want to keep the fronds to 9 and 3 o'clock position. There's some municipalities that only allow you to remove dead or dying fronds. So anything that was brown would be allowed to be removed. But that's rare. I mean, the best for the tree would just be to remove those dead or dying fronds. But obviously in HOAs, that wouldn't look so nice. Whoops. Royal palms, probably quite aware if you lived in South Florida for more than a year, you'll see these large palms with those seed pods that fall down and they can be very dangerous. And also the palm fronds, since it's a self-cleaning tree, will fall when they're dead and they can be very heavy. They can damage cars. And one service we offer is to put royal palm ties, which is basically we trim the tree, put a tie around the crown shaft, which is the neck of the tree, top green area. And when the fronds die, they basically stay up there without falling. And we'll come back every quarter. So every 3 months, sometimes 4 months, we'll come back, cut the ties, cut all the fronds, clean it up, and put another tie on there. Here's an example again of included bark. Excuse me. So this is obvious. This tree had codominant leaders, two main trunks, and this is what you try to avoid. So if you can get a tree when it's very young and remove that codominant leader, you can avoid this in the future. When a tree gets older, this is usually what happens. And if you look carefully, you can obviously see the included bark in this area right here. Sorry, just want to go back. So one thing I wanted to mention as well is, I guess I'll try just trying a blank area to show you. So if you have a tree with, let's say you didn't prune the tree when it was young and you have codominant leaders. Let me try that again. And you want to reduce a large limb. So I have a branch coming up like this. You basically have two main trunks and they branch off into other branches. You wouldn't be able to cut this and create a one central leader right away. That wouldn't be allowed. And the reason for that is you get a large section here and the tree will never be able to heal properly, and it'll most probably get decay and it will kill the tree eventually. So the proper way to do it, and the county allows, according to ANSI 300 standards, is it has to be at least, excuse me, 1/3 the size of the branch that you're trying to reduce it to. So what you would do in this sense is you would trim, this would be a multi-year. This would be maybe for a branch this big and a trunk this big with codominant leaders, this might take you, I don't know, 5 years, 4 to 5 years to get it to where, and what I mean by that is if you were to, let's say, trim 1 year, let's say this part right here, and leave another branch here, and next year trim another piece here, each year that this branch in itself will stop growing because it's not getting the nutrients it needs from the sunlight, and it doesn't have a reason to grow anymore. So it'll stay as this branch or this trunk, I should say, will increase in size. And when this trunk right here gets to be two-thirds the size of this branch, it is safe to cut it off. All right, so misconceptions and other useful information. Best time to trim trees. And as a tree company, this is something I struggle with HOAs and a lot of properties because for whatever reason, well, for obvious reasons actually, HOAs, board members tend to think the best time to trim a tree is just before hurricane season. So the reason in the beginning I mentioned you want to trim trees once a year is because even if it doesn't look like it needs much, what you're doing is you're maintaining that trimmed, the thinned out canopy, that nice look. If you let it go for about 5 or 6 years, now you put yourself at risk because it's rare to get a company to come out and do an extensive trimming on all the trees in your HOA. So it is a good idea to do it every single year. And by maintaining that, it doesn't make a difference if it gets trimmed before hurricane season or after. It will make literally zero difference, in high winds. As long as the trees have been maintained and they are maintained, it makes no difference. The benefit to doing it in the slower season, meaning the season where, like the best times to trim the trees is usually around October, um, up until like February, March, mid to late March. The trees are a little more dormant. In South Florida, they don't always go completely dormant like, northern states. So benefit to that is they will heal themselves after you cut them, but they won't grow immediately. And you can trim a tree, let's say, this is for hardwood trees and palms, by the way. So you get a lot more bang for your buck if you were to trim a tree in, let's say, November. That tree will look trimmed for almost 5 to 6 months as if it was done recently, as opposed to getting it done. If you were to trim a tree, let's say in June or July, within within weeks, actually, you'll see the seed pods growing back and you'll start seeing growth. And with hardwood trees, you'll see suckers or water sprouts growing. So, if it's really a conversation a property manager has to have with the board, or a tree company would have to have with the board to explain this. And it's more of like an education to educate the board on this. But it is definitely more bang for your buck to have it trimmed during those months. So anywhere from October to like mid-March, I would say is the best time. The one exception to this would be medjool palms or date palms. They tend to fruit around April always, so we like to trim them just before maybe in March. So if you have your trees trimmed in, let's say October, we can set up to have it come back. We'd come back in around March, mid-March to trim them. Shaping trees, you cannot shape trees. I don't know if everyone is aware of that, but you cannot use a hedge trimmer to shape a tree. There's no municipality that allows it because ANSI 300 does not allow shaping trees. And the reason for that is somewhat similar to hat racking or cutting limbs. You're just basically cutting limbs without subordinating. Um, Sidewalk damage and tree roots. So I get asked very often to look at a tree and see if it could be if we can put in a root barrier or prune the roots. Um, so my way of going about that is if it's, let's say, a 25-foot hardwood tree, for example, I would give it 6 feet away from the sidewalk before I would feel comfortable pruning the roots and putting in a root barrier. Anything less than that, you greatly increase the chance of damaging the tree, its integrity, and it dying shortly after. Or, now the roots are cut and in a high winds, it could topple over. So on a 25-foot hardwood tree, I would give it at least 6 feet from the sidewalk. Anything less than that, it's not even worth it. In that case, I would recommend removing the tree. Uh, Same thing with tree roots in your foundations. And also one more thing about tree roots in your foundations. A lot of homeowners complain about. So South Florida, you see a lot of surface roots. Reason for that is South Florida has terrible soil, a lot of sand. So you have about 6 inches, 6 to 12 inches of dirt, if that, good soil, and then it's all sand. So tree roots don't really grow too deep in South Florida. It's almost impossible to have tree roots go underneath the foundation. It does happen, but usually it's because there was an existing drain pipe that's leaking or some sort of leak or reason for the root to want to find it. 99% of the time, there's no reason for tree roots to want to go underneath the foundation. And then I'm also going to show pictures in here of communities where there was a lot of hat racking, and that's up to the property manager. I created a little PDF which basically shows how to properly trim trees, and it's something if anybody wants it, Hikari again will give out my contact information. I'll provide that to you. Um, if you're a property manager or somebody on the board, have your property manager send that out to all the homeowners. It can educate them for if they were to trim their trees themselves, or if they hire somebody, they can show them. This avoids stuff like this basically, which is, oh, I'm sorry, these are just pictures, but they are hat racked, and you can see the water sprouts and the bad growth. These are trees that are about, these are about 15-foot trees, and they are way too close to the sidewalk. You can see it lifting the sidewalk. Yeah, so this tree, I could never prune the roots, and I could never put in a root barrier. A lot of times you'll see companies come out and remove the sidewalks and prune them and then put the sidewalks, pour more concrete. It's just going to be an ongoing issue. And now you've also damaged the integrity of the tree where it can just topple over. These are communities that we don't do the tree trimming for, but we do the tree trimming for the HOA on common property, but these are residential trees. And for whatever reason, the HOA does not have strict standards or enforce violations. And you can see where these trees were hat racked. Basically, a gardener who has no tree trimming experience came in and just hat racked the trees, doesn't understand how to subordinate. And you get these ugly looking water sprouts. Um, some of the homes on the right there are over $1 million homes, and it just destroys the value. Some of these on the left here are around $600,000 homes, $700,000 homes that just the whole neighborhood looks awful. And it's almost contagious. When I see this, it's like, I don't know if homeowners are just, they don't understand, but everybody uses the same guy, and it's throughout the entire community. So on the right side here, it's throughout the entire community. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not one person or maybe two companies. Same thing on the left. All right, so this section here is just questions and answers. So I'm just gonna scroll. There's gonna be a question, and I'll let you figure out the answer. So the answer is just outside the branch collar, and again, because the branch collar has the healing properties of trees. I think this one's quite obvious. All of the above. Hat racking, of course, topping or hat racking, overlifting, flush cuts. Flush cuts, you're obviously removing the branch collar. Overlifting, you're damaging the integrity of the tree, causing it to extend its roots far out and try to grow taller, making it very uneven in windstorms. And hat racking, you're destroying aside from the aesthetics of the tree, which it looks terrible, you are causing water sprouts and weak limbs to grow from there. So I didn't talk too much about this one. I did mention it though. It's a slow to growth of one or more codominant stems or leaders on a tree. And that's what I was talking about when, you have two large codominant leaders. If it's too large and it's more than 1/3 the size of the other branch, the proper way to remove it would be to do it within several years of trimming some other parts of that branch properly, of course, as well, and then letting the other leader, trunk, or limb get bigger so that it's at least 2/3 the size before you trim it. So I'm going to go quick on this one. I didn't talk much about this. Branch bark ridge is basically the raised, darkened area branch tissue near the branch crotch or branch collar. I don't like this term so much or referring to this when making cuts because sometimes in some tree trimming books they'll refer to this. In my experience, it's quite obvious to see where the branch collar is and where it ends. And they have some sort of like formula sometimes to figure that out, but it's just using your eyes is usually the best method. Talk about flush cuts quite a bit. You might see, this is not used anymore, but it was used in the past where you'd see pruning paint. It's basically like a tar-like substance. They would put, usually it'd be in white, and it would cover up where you trimmed. And that's actually, they would put that where people made flush cuts or trimmers flush cut a branch, and it's actually outlawed. It's not used anymore because it doesn't allow the tree itself to heal properly. So this is what I was talking about with included bark. It is one of the reasons you try to maintain or you strive to maintain one strong central leader. It is the weakest part of any tree, hardwood tree. Um, you know, tight angled branches also will have included bark. Codominant leaders, usually if they're too close together, have codominant included bark, and that's where the bark is fused on the inside of the tree in that union and in high winds. And usually you don't notice it, obviously, until the tree is much more mature. And that's when it snaps. When it's very big, it'll break in that section. All right, so which of the following best describes proper palm pruning? Again, I've talked about the 9 and 3 o'clock position. So just think of a clock, and you want to keep fronds basically on a palm tree that is at the 9 and 3 o'clock position. So this right here, I should mention. So 25% of the foliage was the standard for many, many years. This is part of ANSI 300. They did away with this. Um, you know, they prefer for arborists or tree trimmers or anybody to kind of use their own sense of judgment. Um, Obviously, you wouldn't want to take, 60% of the canopy out. That would greatly reduce the amount of sunlight the tree gets, the amount of nutrients a tree uses. So, but they no longer give you a specific amount. I wouldn't personally, unless I'm doing a reduction, at most would take off maybe like 45%, 40 to 45% tops. Anything more than that, I think is really damaging the tree's health. It might not pick back up. And a lot of diseases that trees get them because they're weak. So if the tree's not getting enough water, if it's overwatered, if it's just over pruned, if it's already dealing with decay from a broken branch or improper trimming, that's when they're more susceptible to getting diseases. I talked about this. If it's a large limb and you want it to be, you're trying to get that limb to be 1/3 the size of its codominant limb, then you're going to have to wait sometimes, by properly trimming it each year, maybe, 4 years, 5 years. Yeah. So all of the above here. We talked about this. So if you have a branch, you got, it's a terrible drawing, but you get the idea. If you were to cut it, let's say right here, first cut with a chainsaw, as this branch comes down, the bark will peel. Before you get to the end of that cut, this bark will peel and peel the trunk right here. Now you're leaving the trunk, the bark is the protective layer of a tree. And if you take that away, now you're opening it up to diseases and decay. So that would be incorrect. So you would want to first, let me try to draw this. Research. There we go. You would start off with a cut. So if this is the branch collar right here, about 12 inches away, I would make a underside cut, not too deep, because if you go too deep, as that branch comes down, it will pinch your chainsaw and you won't be able to get it out. Your next cut can be made right here. As this branch comes down and the bark peels, it'll break off right here. And at this point, you have a small, limb, little piece here, stub that you can easily cut off and not worry about it peeling anywhere. So this is more of a question for, tree trimmers. We get asked often to trim trees improperly, and that's mostly because let's say a homeowner is not educated with how trees are trimmed and why trimming them wrong is so bad. But often, like it also happens where they really don't care. They just want it away from their home and whatnot. And a lot of times, uh, the right way to do it would be to remove the tree. If it's just too close, it's not something a lot of people want to consider. But if a tree is too close or if it's causing too many issues, instead of improperly trimming it, you should remove the tree. The county, the city, all municipalities actually prefer that. You would have to go through the county or municipality to pull a permit a lot of times and replace the tree. But um, you know, I also want to mention the like a lot of HOA, especially when you get to a neighborhood that's maybe after 15 years and up. A lot of people blame the builder, and there are times where the builder plants the trees way too close to the buildings, but they're limited in the space they can plant that stuff, and something the HOA needs to consider long term, when a property gets to be, and nobody ever considers this either. It's, when the property gets to be around 15, 10 to 15, or I would say 15 years up, you might have to remove these large trees because they will eventually cause issues, if they're too close to the building, damaging utilities, or they are just causing issues with, dropping leaves on the roof. You can't flush cut a tree on one side or pancake a tree, which is a term we use for if a tree canopy is too close or over a roof or a building, which is completely normal. Um, some homeowners think the whole tree canopy should be off their roof, and that's impossible. A lot of times it's impossible because you can't trim a tree that much or pancake it and make it so lopsided. In a case like that, where it gets really bad, you might want to consider removing the tree. So that should be factored in a long-term budget and maybe do it in phases. So not all pencil necking is because of trimming more than 9 and 3. A lot of times it could be lack of water, lack of nutrients for different reasons as well. This could be more than one answer. Multiple sprouts that form on the stubs may grow large and be weakened, weakly attached, and they break off. But it's true that the trees do look very ugly. They just look awful. The branch structure is all ugly looking. Even to like an untrained eye, it just doesn't look nice. And then stubs, if you hat rack, you end up with stubs that can be attacked by insects and also decay. And then also, you lose it tends to become very bushy at the very end of that stub. So you get a big bushy stub, which is almost like lions tailing a tree. And I just showed an example of this. you only want to go 1/3 into the underside of the branch so that your chainsaw doesn't get pinched. And I'm talking about chainsaws here. You can use anything, pruning saw. And I I made the mistake of thinking when I was explaining in the beginning reduction cut and removal cut. So this is a reduction cut is removing a codominant leader or lowering or reducing the height of a tree. So you would reduce the co or the main central leader. It's basically taking a larger limb back down to a smaller branch. So this is allowed, and I just want to maybe show a little example of why it's not the best kind of cut to do, because where it branches off to this smaller branch, you tend to have a nice branch collar here. Excuse me. So if you were to cut it here, all is great. You have your branch collar with protecting properties. If you were to cut it here instead, which is a reduction cut, taking the larger limb back down to a smaller branch, you just have a little bit of it. You really don't have much of that branch collar, although it is allowed because very times it's necessary, but it's not preferred. No, that's pretty much it. Let me check the questions now. And Hikari, I'm going to need your help here to pull up these questions.
Yes, it's in the Q&A button at the bottom. We have 15 open questions.
Oh, yep, see him. Perfect. Okay, cool. Yep, so first one I have from Arch Johnston. Can you prune oak roots that push up against sidewalks? You can, and I talked about this depending on the size of the tree. So if the tree is, and how close it is to the sidewalk. If it's, again, it's everything is relative. So depending on the size of the tree, if it's a 25-foot tree, oak tree, for instance, that has a, I don't know, 12 to 18 inch diameter trunk. A tree that size, I wouldn't feel comfortable pruning the roots if it was butt up or anywhere less than 6 feet away from the sidewalk. There is really not that I know of, a standard that the county allows that requires. They don't have a standard for that, but based off experience, I would never. If it's a 25-foot oak tree, if it's less than 6 feet away, I would not prune the roots. Or I would. If it's at least 6 feet away from the sidewalk, you would have to prune the roots like right at the sidewalk. I would feel comfortable with that. If you're pruning more than one side, then I would say no, because then you're taking out some of these larger arteries, these large roots, and also you're definitely damaging the tree's integrity where it could topple over. A lot of times, if it's way closer than that, then you have no choice but to remove the tree. And I mentioned, you can also have the sidewalk removed, and they'll prune it. They will prune it. Now you're obviously damaging the tree's integrity, might die, and also now you're at risk of that tree toppling over in high winds. Nice thing about oak trees, guys, and oak tree, live oaks in general are probably the best tree you can plant, or one of the best trees, and that's why you see them so often, is because they don't have a very thick canopy, so wind goes through them. They're very good compartmentalizers, meaning if a limb breaks, they can stop decay. They're very good at fighting disease. Just all around, really nice tree. Laurel oaks, for instance, is the opposite. They tend to decay very easily, tend to look a little weird during the slower seasons. All right, so Samuel Hart, is the typical hurricane cut for palm trees bad for the tree? I see this everywhere, but read it has more potential for weakening tree. Yeah, it depends what kind of hurricane cut, the tree company is planning to do. If they're properly trimming the tree 9 and 3 o'clock position, that's fine. I hear hurricane cut meaning, and I've been asked that before, especially from homeowners. It's basically they're expecting the tree to be trimmed to like, I don't know, 1 and 12 o'clock position, rooster cut basically. So that's very harmful to the tree. It is. Yeah. So great question, Mary. Can you top I'm sorry, can you cut the top of a tree to avoid it getting taller? Yes, as long as it's properly done. So I'll give you an example, like magnolias, if you know, they tend to be very cone shaped or just naturally tend to have one central leader, although they can have multiple codominant leaders. Yeah, you can definitely reduce it. You'd have to do a reduction cut, which is take that codominant leader back down, or that main trunk, I should say, back down to a smaller branch, which is a reduction cut. Yeah, you can definitely do that. Just be aware now you will never have that tree growing any taller. It will start that limb that you cut it back to is a limb that it might start getting, start branching out and it'll grow sideways and whatnot. So think about it before you do a reduction cut to reduce the height. It's going to be somewhat permanent in that sense. Good question. What causes Ganoderma? That's a great question, and nobody really knows. It's Ganoderma is spreading like crazy. Queen palms are getting it more than other ones, and Arecas more than anything else. So I think personally, within like 10 years, South Florida won't have any more, or be very, very little Areca palms left. It's spreading extremely fast, but queen palms tend to get it very, very often. Any kind of palm can get it, but I have no clue how they get it or what causes it. I don't know. I've questioned that myself. I've looked up many times. Even I check all the time. Just to see what the new stuff is coming out. If any universities are coming up with more information on it. But I thought it was coming from at first. I thought it was coming from lake water or irrigation, but that's definitely not the case. So Lisa asks if yeah, oaks are protected. They're a Florida native tree. They can be removed. Yeah, they can definitely be removed. Just replace a tree. Some counties and municipalities expect or actually expect the HOA to self-govern and be responsible in that sense. If they were to allow you to take out a tree or a homeowner, for instance, just be responsible to replant it or put a new one in. But yeah, and then a lot of times if you're pulling a permit in certain municipalities, certain cities, but even the county, they, depending on the size of the tree, they go by canopy credits or by the trunk diameter at breast height. It might require two or three, sometimes even more, replacements for one tree that you remove. So again, it depends on the reason you're removing the tree. Yeah. So David Ailes, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Please forward me a copy of this document. Okay, about hat racking. Yeah, so Hakari can send you a copy of, I think, Hakari, can you send a copy of this entire webinar, or is it like a PDF format?
Yes, it's going to be a PDF of the entire slides, and then it'll be a video recording of this entire webinar
Okay,
with
cool.
the Q&A as well included.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you. So Grace asks, what do you do about trees near the banks of lakes that start to lean towards the lake? Um, I mean, if it's not causing an issue, I mean, it depends how much of a lean, you know. Um, yeah, it depends how big the tree is. If it looks like it might topple over, cause an issue, yeah, then you'd have to cut it down. Robert asks, is there a standard and directions for pruning crepe myrtles? That's a great question, and I get that asked a lot, especially during the webinars. So crepe myrtles, if you look up online, they'll show you proper ways. Again, you're supposed to properly subordinate branches. Crepe myrtles, though, I will say, you know, is one of those trees where people often hat rack or top them, I should say. Um, they're just such fast growers, and if they're topped once, that knuckle, basically where they're topped, they'll, grow new limbs, and they tend to be pretty strong in my experience. And then, sometimes people top them again because they sprout maybe three stems or three branches, excuse me, from each time you top it. Um, it's not advised, but it's done often. Schefflera is another one where um, it's just Schefflera's especially it doesn't make sense too much to subordinate branches on a Schefflera. It gets really tough, so a lot of times you have to top them. Um, But crepe myrtles can be properly trimmed by subordinating branches, to a next lateral branch. But I do often see it where they are, topped. But if you go off ANSI 300 standards, they should be properly subordinated, pruned. So, uh, question here asked, can you prune sable palms in August after all the flower stalks appear? Yeah, absolutely. You can trim trees anytime, palms anytime you want. The best time to trim them, as I mentioned, is if you wait till October, you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck because it won't sprout again. We do jobs where you trim them, during the growing season, and like Washingtonias, for instance, a week later you'll see a long seed pod grow out of the tree. It's incredible how fast it grows. And if you were to wait until October, November, December, all these, up to like maybe mid-March, you're gonna get a lot more. That tree won't grow as much, and even afterwards, you're gonna notice it in maybe like up until you trim it again, the tree will look a lot less dirty than it would if you were to trim it in June or July, and that goes for both hardwood trees and palms. And I also mentioned, date palms is the exception to that rule. So Samuel asks, you showed pictures of trees next to lifted sidewalks and mentioned some companies will remove the sidewalk sections and cut the roots, damaging the integrity of the tree. This is what our county does. Trees have fallen after this has occurred. Would cutting the roots actually contribute to the tree falling? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's a tree holds itself up with its roots. So if you're cutting those roots, yeah, you're taking away that anchoring on that side of the tree. Absolutely. Okay, so Mary asks again, can you please give examples of tree barriers and how effective they are when installed when a tree is planted? So there's mechanical barriers, which are like harder plastic type barriers that are interlocking. We've installed those before, and the only time I install those is where we normally use chemical barriers. Typar is the brand we use, which is the same brand used by every county and the highway companies that do work on the highways. It's the best product. It's a chemical barrier, and it's rated to 15 or 20 years that they warranty the product, but it can last a lot longer than that. Um, it's the most effective, and it does not kill the tree. If the roots touch it, it just diverts the roots away, so it doesn't kill it. That being said, if it's too close, like if I've had somebody where they had a pool deck and they had Clusia hedge, which is can be invasive a little bit, their roots, and it was growing underneath their pool deck and lifting up the pavers. They wanted a barrier installed, and I was uncomfortable with putting in a chemical root barrier just because it was so close to the roots in the trunk, and I thought it might kill the tree. So that's where I installed a mechanical plastic interlocking barrier. But for 99% of the time, I put in a chemical Typar root barrier, and I try to put in 18 inches. 18 inches usually is what Typar themselves recommend for sidewalks and areas like that. And especially South Florida, you wouldn't need much more than 18 inches. Okay, so we have lost so many Sylvester palms due to lethal bronzing. Yeah, it's safe to, yeah, the lethal bronzing, Ganoderma, a lot of the diseases. Well, so lethal bronzing is a insect that transfers diseases from palm to palm. But even with lethal bronzing, I don't feel comfortable replanting in that area. You might be able to with lethal bronzing out of all of them if there's no nearby palms that are infected. But any of the fungal diseases, I would not replant in the same area. And if I had to plant, I'd at least plant at the very minimum 10 feet away from where that tree was removed. But yeah, Sylvester palms, medulls, date palms, or lethal bronzing, sable palms get them a lot. Trim coconut palms can be trimmed anytime. Again, I mentioned trimming trees when they're dormant in South Florida is the best time to create the less grow back. Coconut palms are often trimmed actually twice a year if HOAs for liability reasons, obviously. Um, but yeah, because they're liable. Again, other trees that we trim twice a year. You can trim most trees can be trimmed twice a year. A lot of HOAs, a lot of communities do it just for aesthetics. It looks nice. Sable palms look a lot nicer when they're trimmed twice a year. But coconut palms for liability reasons, yes, and royal palms for liability reasons, absolutely. And of course, you again, nice trees like date palms, you'd want to trim them twice if they're like the centerpiece near monument signs. Can you correct hat rack trees? Yeah, yes, you can, depending on how bad the hat racking is. So if certain areas of the tree was hat racked, yes. If there's a lateral branch that you can trim back to, yes. But if the entire tree was hat racked, absolutely not. It's pretty much done at that point. Or if a large part of the tree was done where if you were to trim it back would destroy the structural branch structure of the tree or just the look of the tree aesthetically, then it's not worth even trying to correct. But it can be corrected if you have something to work with. John asks, do you have to worry about oak trees growing under foundations? So no, no, again, most trees don't have invasive roots, especially even ficus trees, believe it or not. You see a lot of surface roots and people get worried about that. Usually as they grow towards the foundation and hit the foundation, they're going to grow sideways. Again, South Florida has terrible soil, so you have a lot of sand and tree roots don't want to grow that deep. Choking here. But if there's a leak underneath the foundation or a broken drain or whatever, then it will find its way underneath. So aside from that, no, usually you don't have a reason to be concerned. So Walter asks, what is a tree association you keep mentioning? So I was referring to ANSI, which is the standard that most municipalities adopt in their tree trimming requirements. ANSI 300, they have a handbook that tells you how to properly, and it goes beyond just tree trimming. They have requirements or standards for more than just tree trimming, landscaping, tree planting, land anything. I don't know if that's what you're talking about, or also ISA, International Tree Association. Um, Lindsay asks, does cutting down a tree stop the roots from growing, or do you have to remove the stump too? So that's an interesting question. Just see how much time I have here. Oh, geez. Yeah, usually it does. So cutting a tree down to the stump usually stops it from growing. I've seen it before, actually on two occasions. It's very rare, but I've seen it on two occasions, and they were live oaks, I think both times, where the tree was cut down and even the stump was ground. And I guess the roots had energy reserves and continued to grow. And that's a really scary thing that you can't really plan for that because you're not gonna the price to actually excavate an entire area is ridiculous. With palm trees, the roots grow in a root ball. With like an oak tree or any kind of hardwood trees, they spread out long, far the roots. So you can't really pull them out unless they're smaller. So you really can't ask a tree company to price removing not only the stump but all the roots because you don't know where the roots are. You'd have to excavate the entire area. But I've seen it where they continue to grow little water sprouts, and it's insane. It just continues growing. And I've seen one where it's now 5 years since the tree was removed, and it just continues to grow. And uh, in a situation like that, you kind of have to go excavate, which is going to be expensive. You can also come in with a huge stump grinder and like pulverize the entire yard. But yeah, but I would say 99% of the time, cutting a tree down to the stump stops it from growing. I mean, it depends how low too, because I think I included some pictures of a neighborhood where they were cut pretty low to like stumps. There was no HOA violations or regulations, and you could see water sprouts going out of them. So yeah, it's best to grind the stump. Do cassia trees do part? Yeah, cassia trees don't do, from what I've seen, they don't tend to do so great, and I really don't know why that is. I don't know. Yeah, there was a batch of bad Daehoon hollies several years ago where the county put out sent out letters just recommending vendors not to install Daehoon hollies. They just had a disease, and I really don't know why that is. It might be the same case with cassia trees, but they don't do great. Thank you, Shannon. So Mary asked the same question I answered about the tree roots on their foundations. Thank you, John. Thank you, guys. Appreciate the feedback. Thank you, guys. David, thank you very much. Hikari?
Perfect. I think that's it for the questions. We appreciate everyone's participation and thank you, Sean, again for your time. And again, thank you, everyone. We will see you again in the future. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thanks for watching. For more great educational content, click the subscribe button now.